Oh, I'm sorry, our company doesn't work that way. You want me to give you the number of a different cable company that can... Oh, wait, we're it, aren't we? Dang it.
As if we haven't talked about Unity enough. Why not talk about it even more?
Continuing with this whole Unity debacle, the Unity
Here we go.
offices have had to shut down for the remainder of the week due to death threats. Today,
Oh
we
my
have been
God.
made aware of a potential threat to some of our offices.
I've said this time and time again. It doesn't matter how upset I am with a brand or some kind of entity. Don't engage on my behalf, especially a violent threat. Who's threatening Unity? Like, you can be mad about pricing and what have you. Don't threaten them. Don't engage with their products. Cost them money, not lives. Whoever made that threat, I hope they get arrested.
As of this morning, the credible death threat that prompted the closure of Unity offices yesterday was made by a Unity employee, police have now revealed, which is wild. I mean, we know...
Inside job. Yeah, everyone who can jump ship is jumping ship. No one's gonna stick around to be like, oh, okay, Unity's gonna do better now that they've heard the voice of the public. No. Just like a pure profit, no consideration for the consumer whatsoever, trying to make a good product. It's completely thoughtless and out of touch.
Who is pulling the same BS, except in a way that is detrimental to his brand and to the brand of Unity as a whole across the industry. And I don't know what the hell he was thinking.
He was thinking, they can afford it. They're making lots of money making these games without any consideration of the agreements that a lot of game devs have to make with a publisher, the expenses that go into it even without a publisher, paying salaries, keeping the lights on in a studio if you're working out of an office. Bruh. This was the dumbest thing you could have done.
This doesn't make you understand how truly twisted and just backwards the CEOs of the game world are. I mean, come on. This is a perfect example.
There was internal talks about how this might happen. A lot of people within the company spoke up about it and said, what are you doing? Don't do this. You're going to ruin the company. They did it anyway, and now people are resigning. Which, I mean, if I was working for Unity, I'd probably resign too, because I probably have investment in stocks options as being a part of the company, and now all my stock is going through the floor because people are short selling the hell out of this company publicly. Unity existed as a cheaper alternative to Unreal. When Unreal became practically free, Unity did have its days numbered. Yeah, I could sense that too. I was under the impression that Unreal Engine was entirely free, but there is a point when, like, you're using it for commercial purposes, you do pay an amount. But what I've seen, at least from like Twitter posts online, is that you get your first million royalty free, after which you pay 5%. And I think a flat 5% rate is kind of fair. Somewhat of an extremist opinion, but I do kind of side with Zach when he said, if you buy a software and you make a new product with that software, you should be entitled to 100% of what you make with that software. I tend to agree with that. They're already getting tons of money through their platform. If you're using their launcher to give yourself more optics on your game as a means of selling it, sure, that makes sense. But just overall revenue for the fact that I used your game engine to make my game, that kind of sucks. It's like paying 5% for research and development for your engine. The benefit Unreal gives to the project, 5% is worth it. I would think so. They're not asking a huge amount. Whereas you make a game with Unreal Engine and then you try to sell it on Steam, and Steam takes 30% of your revenue. And I can understand that because Steam is the most popular game launcher platform / store. You're most likely to be seen on there. If you're a huge publisher, sure, you can reach a flat agreement. Yeah, there's definitely like background negotiating that could take place as well. Definitely. Now, if you're getting into game development, learn Unreal Engine, or there are lots of other alternatives depending on the style of game you want to make.
Today, Unity, one of the world's biggest game engines, became the game development community's punching bag. And for very good reasons. Recently, we've been talking a lot about cashing out good faith in bad will, and well, today is more of the same, except this is something on a scale I have never quite seen. It's no secret that the indie community when it comes to game development has been hit the hardest in recent years. Between Steam having a 30% fee on all sales, and publishers just nickel and diming studios for every little penny that they've got. Well,
although I've heard once you reach like a certain amount, Steam lowers that fee to like 20%, but even still, that's a huge chunk.
Well, it's no wonder that this is something we're once again talking about, but on a much bigger scale. Now, yesterday, Unity posted something on their forums listing new changes to their business model. And this includes the use of... I actually can't believe I'm about to say this. In fact, I just want to point out that I thought this was a Reddit troll post, and I had to check that it was real. They are now planning to not charge you a fee based on your total profits from games made within their engine, like Unreal Engine currently do. They are going to charge you per install of your game. Now you, the viewer, an intellectual, has probably just ran about 7 scenarios through your head on why this is an absolutely awful idea. But
the first thing that came to my mind is people being exploitive and botting this to maliciously harm developers.
Don't worry, it gets so much worse. Now, they've got lots of different tiers for their fees, but we're going to be talking about the first one as this affects the most people. This is the category most people fall into, including indie games. If your game has over $200,000 revenue in the last year and over 200,000 total lifetime game installs, you are going to pay 20 cents per game install. Not per purchase, not per game sale, per game install. This means that if you were a game developer and I purchased your game and I installed it on 2 computers and a laptop, after purchasing it once,
right,
you are charged 60 cents. This is the basis of so many problems with this idea that...
And it is kind of an outlier, but for the power user, we're talking about you install it on your desktop, you install it on your laptop, and you install it on your Steam Deck. 60 cents against the dev. And that, like, this tier where we're talking about indie games, the amount of processing power or graphics power required to run an indie game, it's probably one of those titles where it can run on all of those things. This change also necessitates an internet connection during install so they can track it, which will grind any development of offline play games to a halt on Unity. Yeah, exactly. It's like every game now has to be a live service game, and you can't go with the free-to-play, buy things in-game model anymore because all the revenue of that game, they're gonna... Because as far as I know, that revenue includes in-game purchases. And somehow they're just tracking all of this. I'm wondering, at the end of the day, how are they able to track any of this information? How are they presenting the bill? Because you don't get any kind of like breakdown. We're just supposed to trust bro and assume that the bill is fair. I always install it in all my computers, all 4 of them. Yeah, exactly. Unless they somehow cache the tracking, but that can go wrong in so many ways. Right. At the end of the day, I don't think that there's any ethical way to go about tracking that doesn't ultimately result in then a privacy issue surfacing.
I can't even list all of them. I am coming up with new scenarios where this is a terrible idea, basically hour by hour. Now, something to note is that if you do fall into that category of $200,000 over the last year and 200,000 lifetime installs, well, that means you're going to be paying $40,000 a year to Unity. Once you take into account that, plus Steam fees, publishing fees and all that, you're realizing your money is slowly slipping away. But let's forget about Steam fees for a minute. Let's forget about publishing fees, because this total would be the total money after that anyway. So let's say you've made $200,000 after Steam fees, after publishing fees, and you've got 200,000 sat there remaining. 40,000 of that immediately goes to Unity. That is disgusting. That is a 20% fee straight off the bat. And that is just assuming that everybody who has installed the game has installed it once. So there's a really funny scenario here that actually affects quite a few developers, which I find to be hilarious. This new business model actively punishes good indie games. Here's an example. Let's say that this theoretical game has still only made $200,000 in the last 12 months, but they've had 1 million installs, which has happened to quite a few games. Now, if you do the maths real quick in your head, that's $200,000 that they owe Unity, despite the fact that all they have made is $200,000. So yes, there is a scenario that if somebody gets 1,000,001 downloads on a game that has only made them $200,000, they lose money. And every install after that, they lose more money. I am in sheer disbelief that this was even conceptualized by Unity, passed on like down a chain of command, and everyone just went, yeah, that's fine. And
not a single person pulled out a calculator or even had a single thought of the negative outcomes. They just thought about the pros of, oh, this is how much money we could make.
It is now day one of being announced, and the user base have found all these issues. But it gets worse, so much worse. Unity actually issued a response to this, and it's not good either. We'll get to that in a bit though, so stay tuned. So, you've heard of review bombing games that you don't like.
Install
what about
bombs.
mass installing them, uninstalling them, and reinstalling them? Or, you know what? Just making a call to the API in the game file that notifies Unity of a game install. You can quite literally bleed a company dry that you don't like by infinitely reinstalling their game. Now, the next one to me is pretty hilarious. WebGL-based games, you know, those games on the web that you don't download. And you might be thinking, well, they're free of that, right? And somehow I have to say this again. It gets worse. Because according to Unity in a recent Q&A as of today, every time the WebGL files are initiated, aka you click on the web page that loads them, the dev will be charged 20 cents. And if you refresh that game and refresh the cache by thereby
reinstalling the runtime. Oh my god. I didn't even think about web-based games. Are you kidding me? We collect anonymous data. It's really hard to recognize the same use. Yeah, exactly. It's not possibly trackable in a meaningful way that you could give an authentic, accurate billing to each of these developers. It doesn't make any sense. The Unreal execs had to have paid off the Unity exec to get market share. No explanation makes sense. Yeah. I mean, yeah, if we want to put our tinfoil hats on to come up with a why, that could be one of them.
Installing the game on the browser temporarily, they get charged again. This is something I physically can't wrap my head around. Because with most companies and their just vile practices, I can at least see what they're trying to do with it, whether it's good or bad. I just can't see what they're trying to do here. I can't make head.
Usually you can look at a situation, whether you like it or not, and try to glean some sense of logic. But this is entirely devoid of logic.
So tales of it. All that I can see them doing is sandbagging their company for absolutely nothing other than some quick money. Because again, it gets worse. You may remember earlier this year when Unity got themselves into hot water because their CEO basically said, as an indie developer, if you're not adding microtransactions to your game, you're an idiot. So,
yeah, I mean, Bellular highlighted what they said in quotations. They called them idiots for not being pro monetization. When maybe some devs just actually care about making a good game first and getting good faith of the people and making money after the fact as a result of being good. Leslie's back for 2 months in a row. Hey, thank you so much for renewing, Leslie. It means a lot to me. My best friend in the whole world. I appreciate it. Thank you so much. Those who are willing to stick around and resubscribe get that very special sound. It reminds me of my childhood when you reveal something special, and sticking around and hanging out with me and my community is a special thing. 0707.
Got him! 07.
Thank you. Awesome. Unity is publicly traded, so making a monetization announcement is likely to drive stock value up, even if they eventually walk it back. Quick way to drive a buck. Yeah, I mean, even though the stock went down a little bit, people are going to buy into that stock. They know it's going to rebound. Unity really is kind of a blue chip investment. Regardless of how you slice it, there are companies that are well established and are willing to pay those fees. This is really hurting the little guy more than anybody. And, you know, people can be as outraged as they want, but they will make money at the end of the day.
Already, you can see that they're wanting indie games to include microtransactions, especially the successful ones. Now, What does this new change push? Well, indie games that have got tons of installs that are really popular but are, in his words, undermonetized, you're going to be punished. You will be punished for making a good, down-to-earth game. And I'm sorry if I start saying really upset in this video, but it's because I am. I don't even use Unity.
But he's a game dev, so he can relate to the feelings of other game devs. It's a lot of work to put together a good game. And you leverage a game engine because you don't want to design, you don't want to try and reinvent the wheel from square one, make your own game engine and then the game. So you utilize a tool that helps you streamline your project and bring your idea to life. And out of nowhere, they swoop in and take a bat to your knees where you can't even make a decent living.
I'm an Unreal boy through and through. But the fact that Unity is willing to target the entire indie community, just whip it out and treat them as a, a community cum dumpster, I am actually beyond words. And here's the thing, people are saying, oh, maybe they'll walk it back because this is clearly a terrible idea. I don't even care if they walk this back or try to walk this back and say, oh, well, we'll tackle this another time, we'll take the L, because that's exactly it. They'll tackle it another time. And once you're locked into their ecosystem,
and that's what Bellular speculated on is, okay, they'll walk it back, but they'll probably come up with some sort of watered down strategy. And that's just it. You test the waters with the public, even if you get outrage, it puts you in the headlines. The stock goes down, people buy in, stock comes back up. You continue business as normal, and then you start going inch, 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 inch until you're at the position you wanted to be that you initially proposed. That's exactly what they're trying to do.
You basically have to bend the knee to this. You've got no choice. There are currently games built in Unity that are very successful who are kind of screwed. In fact, Danny, a fellow game developer, posted on Twitter. He is
oh
the
my gosh, Danny!
Game. Anyone got a cool $5 million they can lend me? Because based on his installs and earnings, he's going to have to pay them a stupid amount of money. And because
let me see that again. 28 million installs at 20 cents is $5.6 million. Does he not charge for the game? How much did he make with the game? I forget how much the crab game costs.
What if you didn't make anything?
Well, like if you didn't make anything, then like what's the point in doing it? At the end of the day, we live in a capitalist society. Now, with the exception of things like HoloCure, they, in my opinion, they took an idea of a game that already existed and reskinned it to a community that they enjoyed. So they probably felt a sense of like, I shouldn't charge for this. I just want people to play the game and get interested in the HoloLive existence, if you will. But nobody's going to just make a game for free. They deserve to get a little bit of kickback for their work. But you're right. If they don't charge for the game at all, they don't owe anything. But it hugely disincentivizes anybody doing anything creative or innovative at all.
Because based on his installs and earnings, he's going to have to pay them a stupid amount of money. And I think it's safe to say the game hasn't made that much, because it's just a good game with very small microtransactions. So again, hitting the 200k threshold, but, install base is way bigger. So that's it. We're going to jump.
One thing I'm unclear on, were they planning to backcharge or would it only be going forward? Actually, my wife asked the same thing yesterday when I was describing the situation to her. As far as I know, the thing that's lifetime tracked are the installs. There's that qualification you have to meet, but it's not like an and or. It's and 200,000 in revenue over the course of a year. And they are were instituting this change January 1st, 2024. So I guess you wouldn't be getting that bill until you at least reached that $200,000 mark sometime in 2024 or close to the end of the year. That's my understanding. Or, do they start the tracking as soon as you make your first penny? If for some reason it starts in February 2024, in any case, it sounds like they've walked it back. That's no longer the case. Either way, it's a ridiculous proposal. Crab game makes me think of Crab Rave. Yeah. Ding, 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 ding. I checked Steam. Crab game is free on Steam, but with cosmetic microtransaction. That's the other thing that I'm not 100% on, that some of you might be able to clarify, is it's revenue in general with the game, right? So even if it's cosmetic in-game purchases, that's still revenue of the game. Which, again, begs the question to me, how are they doing tracking? Because then they're tracking what players are buying. I'm tracking my purchases, bro? What the hell?
I'm going to jump over to the PC, and we're going to look at some of these ridiculous Q&A answers that they gave in response to this, because this doesn't even feel like a human answered these. There was no compassion in the answers to these questions, or any sort of, we didn't realise that may be an issue. This is just a straight up, yeah, we know, we don't care, here's your answers.
Okay, so let's look into this, because this is where it gets really interesting. Question, how are you going to collect installs? Answer, we leverage our own proprietary data model. We believe it gives an accurate determination of the number of times the runtime is distributed for a given project.
I just want to go ahead and self-promote. If y'all want to check out YouTube and give me a quick view for this funny little caption video I made.
I should be. Good Lord, what is happening in there?
Now, it troubles me that they say, we believe it is accurate, because that really just goes to show that they don't want to be held liable for when it's not. Right. And they also can't say it is accurate if they know it's not.
We don't want to speak with confidence so that if some story arises where we completely erroneously overcharge someone and then have to roll it back and make adjustments, we're not held accountable for what we said early on.
Is software made in Unity going to be calling home to Unity whenever it's ran, even for enterprise licenses? We use a composite model for counting runtime installs that collects data from numerous sources. The Unity runtime fee will use data in compliance with GDPR and CCPA. The data being requested is aggregated and is being used for billing purposes. This is a really interesting question, because if users' data is being sent to Unity, well, that's kind of dodgy, because you agree to certain information that is normally opt-in or opt-out with companies such as Blizzard, such as Jagex, such as all these other companies. You have a choice to not play their game if you don't want information in their hands, and that you're well within your right to do.
Class action lawsuit cooking and coming soon? Yeah, that's what I've heard. A lot of the major publishers are looking to band together and just sue Unity.
You don't have a choice with this. This game just straight up sends your data to Unity, who you have not agreed to send your data to. So there is a big security risk here, and I agree with the asking of this question, because this is terrifying. This next one blew my mind. Just how sort of nonchalantly the answer was given, as if just, yeah, obviously. If a user reinstalls / re-downloads a game / changes their hardware, will that count as multiple installs? Answer, yes. The creator will need to pay for all future installs. The reason is that Unity doesn't receive end player information, just aggregate data. Basically saying, we don't know who the fuck's installed your game, we just know someone has. And we can't tell you who it is so that you can prove us right or wrong.
That way, if we want to be malicious against a developer that we don't like, we're not held liable, we just get paid.
We're just going to tell you that you owe us cash money. This is wrong on so many levels, because there is no fact-checking here. Unity can say, you owe us this much money, and there are this many installs in this many locations. And you cannot go through and say, yes, that person installed. Okay, they reinstalled 4 times. That's fair. You cannot prove or disprove the fee and figure that you are given to pay to Unity. You're just expected to pay it. I mean, I don't even know. I'm lost for words, as you can probably tell. Next question doesn't get any better. If a game that made enough money to be over the threshold has a demo of the same game, doing...
Now, this is the one that really, to me, it's like all demos count then, because nobody makes a demo that is separate from the full game. The majority of the time, you get a demo, you install it, you've effectively installed the game, so that if you decide you like the game, you can pay the transaction for the game in-game, and then continue playing.
Installs of the demo also induce a charge. Answer, if it's early access beta or a demo of the full game, then yes. If you can get from the demo to the full game, then yes. If it's not like a single level that can't upgrade, then no. Which isn't a demo in that case. All this is doing is discouraging
all demos count.
Any sort of free game or freemium game This is begging the developers to just go full scorched earth with microtransactions so that they don't go bankrupt from making a good game. What a time to be alive. What a world to live in, where one of the world's biggest games...
So then microtransactions aren't a part of the revenue being calculated to bill? I was under the impression that it was. I thought it was any revenue you make in the game, because you're effectively using the Unity game engine to create assets that you can then monetize in your game. So I'm not clear on that.
Game engines are punishing their developers for making a good game. Anyway, onwards, because it gets so much more interesting. What is going to stop us from being charged for pirated copies of our games? And again, this is a fantastic question, and the answer just doesn't inspire any confidence. We do already have fraud detection practices in our ads technology, which is solving a similar problem. So we will leverage that know-how as a starting point. Basically saying we don't have a way to stop that right now, but we'll come up with something. We recognise that users will have concerns about this, and we will make available a process for them to submit their concerns to our fraud compliance team.
So rather than catching it in the act and not forwarding the charge to the developer, well, we're going to forward the charge to you initially, but then you could try and reach out to our compliance team, and we'll think about giving you your money back if we can find a reasonable, amount of evidence to justify us refunding you.
Basically, we're going to slap you with a charge that you can't prove whether it's pirated copies or not, and neither can we, apparently. So, eat shit, I guess? Because here's the thing. Unity games are quite easy to pirate. There is no ifs or buts about that. You can go on Pirate Bay. You can go on you can go on pirating sites and you can see all Unity games just everywhere. New ones, old ones, big ones, small ones. They're everywhere. So imagine this. Someone steals your game. So not only have you not gained the £10 that you would have for someone buying that game, for an example, you now have to pay 20 cents per person that steals your game. You are...
No. Per install. You pirate that game, you install it 4 times, that's 4 runtime installs. That's 80 cents.
You are paying for someone to steal your game. Are we living in a Looney Tunes sketch right now? Because this is just abysmally nuts. I don't have words. You're probably noticing I'm running out of words to describe my just disappointment in this. Next up, I am bewildered at. Because this one straight up kills web games. Web games will be gone that are made in Unity, completely gone.
Wow.
Does this affect WebGL and streamed games? Answer. Games on all platforms are eligible for the fee, but will only incur costs if both the installs and revenue thresholds are crossed. Installs, which involves initialization of the runtime on a client, are counted on all platforms the same way.
So with web games, if it's a simple enough game that can just run in your browser, I could go to my public library and go play a game, so long as it doesn't block me. Runtime install, charge.
WebGL and streaming included. Oh my god. For those of you who don't know what that means, or that's too wordy and too techie, don't worry bro, I got you. This means that whenever the game is loaded on a web page, which is every time you go to play the game, it is counted as an install. What? I'm going to lead with a very good example here that many people will...
DRM doesn't come included with the engine. Galaxy of Games has no DRM, and most Steam DRM, 99% or greater, is easily removable. Okay. Sorry, can you just define DRM for me? Initialization, wait, that could be defined separate from an actual install. Yeah, so they're clarifying and saying even further, it's not just installs, it's just initializations, meaning in the case of web games, just loading the page, just taking whatever it needs to run the game, it counts.
Remember, and it's relevant to the last video. RuneScape used to be a web-based game. What happens is, when you click it, it loads the runtime environment in your browser, aka installing it according to Unity. Jagex would have had to have paid 20 cents per time that you open RuneScape. Yeah, sure, maybe they could probably afford to pay that, just about. But now think of the games that aren't charging membership, that aren't huge. If you have a web game that you occasionally open and play, you cost the developer of that 20 cents every time you play it. So to break even, they will have to somehow make 20 cents from you every time you interact with the game, every time you open a session of that game. And they don't see a problem with this. That's disgusting. This is...
What if you have a bug that can be easily fixed by just reloading? Who in their right mind thought this was a good idea? Dr. Evil level scheming? I know, right? Oh, you have a successful game? Now you owe us $1 million. The exe of the game validate that the user purchases it on Steam. It connects to your Steam install, but this is removable using available tools. Doesn't require special know-how for each game. Yeah, but even if you remove it, the fact that it has to go through would be the thing that they're tracking with their proprietary sources, I would assume. So even if you remove it retroactively, I don't think that would save the developer anything. Maybe it would.
Without a doubt, spitting in the face of a community that helped build their empire. And then the final question is the one that I could
not for pirated copies.
Could not believe was real. Are these fees going to apply to games which have been out for years already? If you met the requirement threshold 2 years ago, you'll start owing for any installs monthly from January, in theory. It says they'll use previous installs to determine threshold eligibility, and then you'll start owing them for the new ones. Yes, assuming the game is eligible in distributing the Unity runtime, then runtime fees will apply. We look at a game's lifetime installs to determine eligibility for the runtime fee. Then we bill the runtime fee based on all new installs that occur after January 1st, 2024.
There you go. So, if you're already meeting the thresholds, then starting January 1st, they start milking you right away.
So if you have made a game in the past, you're not even free of this new egregious system. You've not got the option of saying, well, I'm not going to make any more games in Unity. We're backtracking this. You are getting railed whether you like it or not. Some people are in a position right now that, as this stands currently, as soon as we hit the 1st of January, they are going to have to shut their game down because it will cost them money. It will cost them money.
Yeah, so there was some game called Cult of the Lamb that went on Twitter and said, buy and install our game now because we'll be removing it from the shop on January 1st.
How? I just can't wrap my head around this. It's so disappointing.
I normally don't encourage the boycotting of companies, but I am going to go out on a limb here. And I'm going to say that this is one time that I can remember in the last 5 years where a company truly does need to be boycotted. Where you guys, the developers that are working in their ecosystem, need to drop tools and walk away. I know it can be hard to do. I have moved game engines in the past, and it's a daunting experience. But you are being trampled on right now by someone who knows that they can milk you for everything you've got. And in doing so, will force you to milk your players, causing this feedback loop of them making more and more money. You guys don't deserve this. None of the game development community do. This is bad for developers, which means it's even worse for the gamers. I urge anyone using Unity to move to another game engine. There are many other game engines. You're not limited to just moving to Unreal, although I would highly recommend it as a long-term user of it myself. Game engines like Godot have come a long way with their 3D tech now, and they are what I would call a viable game engine. Gamers and game developers alike deserve better than this. And I hope Unity gets what's coming for them.
I do really appreciate Callum Upton. He's a great dev. He's the one who called out the Earth 2 CEO, one of those crypto-style games, just absolute scam, claiming that they had done all kinds of things in terms of technology when they were just literally ripping assets that were available to anyone.